She shoved the shelf aside and the flashlight caught it. A door, sealed with fresh concrete. She pressed her palm flat against it. The cold came through, different from the rest of the basement. She ran the beam along the edges. Smooth, clean, recent. Not a repair job. Someone had done this deliberately. Someone who did not want it found. She put her ear against it. Nothing. Then a sound from above, a branch cracking against the window, and she spun too fast and grabbed the wall to keep from going down. 8 months pregnant. No signal. The nearest neighbor was 4 miles down a dirt road. Her name was Dana Morrow. The woman who had sealed this door was her mother. A woman who had been dead for 6 weeks. What was her mother hiding? And why had she never said a word? Stay with me on this one. 6 weeks before that moment in the basement, Dana Morrow had stood in the rain at her mother's graveside in a small cemetery outside of Breaux Bridge, Louisiana. 12 people. A short service. She didn't cry. That's the part she kept coming back to afterward. She stood there in the rain and felt mostly just the rain. Her mother's name was Elaine Morrow, 61 years old. Stroke in the kitchen. The neighbor who found her said the coffee was still warm on the counter. Dana hadn't been to see her in almost 2 years. They had what most people would call a complicated relationship, which is just a polite way of saying they fought often and meant it. Elaine was a woman who kept things, her feelings, her history, her reasons. She gave you what you needed and held the rest to herself. Dana had spent most of her adult life being frustrated by that and never quite understanding why. There had been a year, somewhere in Dana's mid-20s, when they hadn't spoken for 8 months. Dana had said something she didn't take back. So had Elaine. The silence lasted longer than either of them expected. When they finally talked again, it was carefully, on the edges of things, nowhere near the center. They had maintained that distance for years. It was workable. It was sad. But Elaine had been the only family Dana had. And now she was gone. Dana had flown down for the funeral, handled the paperwork, gotten the house locked up. Then she'd flown back to Houston and told herself she'd deal with the estate when she had more room to breathe. Marcus left on a Thursday morning 3 weeks later. No argument, no blow-up. He told her he wasn't ready and walked out with 1 bag. Dana was 7 months pregnant. She gave herself 2 days to fall apart. Then she started making lists. The problem with lists when you're 7 months pregnant and your partner has just left is that they keep arriving at the same answer. She couldn't make the rent alone. She'd been freelancing, medical transcription mostly, and the income looked stable until you actually looked at it. She called her landlord, explained the situation, asked for an extension. He gave her 3 weeks. The 3 weeks came and went faster than she expected. Then the locks were changed. She sat on the front step with her 2 suitcases and her laptop bag and felt the full weight of it. 32 years old. No family. No real savings. A baby coming in 4 weeks. And a farmhouse in rural Louisiana that she owned outright, because her mother had died without a will and Dana was the only heir. She hadn't wanted to go back. The house was full of silences she hadn't finished arguing with. But she didn't have a choice. The drive from Houston was 6 hours. She stopped twice. Once for gas, once just to stand outside and breathe. Because the sky had gone low and gray and the land on either side of the highway had started to feel like walls. By the time she crossed into the parish, the light was orange and dropping fast. She pulled down the gravel road just before dark. The house sat at the end of it. 2 stories. White paint going gray. Porch boards that needed replacing. A yard that had gone back to its own business. Elaine had bought it in the 1980s for cash. Where the cash came from was one of the questions Dana had stopped asking, and had lived there alone since Dana left for college. Inside, it smelled like her childhood. Dust and old wood and her mother's floral soap. Still there in the walls 6 weeks after she died. Dana stood in the hallway for a moment. Then she forced herself to move. She needed the sitting room cleared to sleep on the ground floor. To do that, she needed storage space in the basement. She found the old flashlight in the kitchen drawer. The power was on, but the basement bulb had burned out years ago, and she opened the basement door. The smell hit her first. Cold concrete and something else underneath it that she couldn't quite name. She went down, pulled her sweater tighter. Spent 20 minutes moving the first two shelves and getting a sense of the space, which was bigger than she remembered. A lot of things pushed back against the far wall. She shoved the heavy shelf aside. The flashlight caught the door. The door didn't open easily. That should have been enough to make her stop. An 8 months pregnant woman alone in a dead woman's house with no cell signal, hammering at a sealed door in a dark basement. That is not a reasonable thing to do. Dana knew that. She stood there and told herself to go back upstairs. Sleep on it. Think clearly in the morning. She stood there for about 30 seconds. Then she went to the shelf by the stairs and got the hammer. The concrete wasn't structural. It was thin, a covering just enough to make the frame look finished. She chipped at it for 20 minutes, stopped to catch her breath, chipped some more. Her lower back was screaming. The baby had been quiet all evening, the particular stillness that sometimes meant sleeping and sometimes meant discomfort, and she didn't know which it was right now. She didn't stop. When the frame came loose, the door swung inward on its hinges. The air hit her, cold. The specific cold of a room that hasn't been opened in a long time but has also been lived in. She felt both things at once, old air and something human under it. She pointed the flashlight in. A room, narrow, maybe 6 feet across, running back roughly 15 feet under the foundations of the house. On the left wall, a cot with a flat pillow and a folded blanket. On the right, a small wooden table with a kerosene lamp and a box of matches. A bucket in the corner. A chamber pot, cleaned but unmistakable. And on the walls photographs, pinned in rows, some overlapping, dozens of them. Dana stepped in. Every instinct said don't go further. But she went further. The photographs were old, most of them. Faded Polaroids and printed snapshots from when people took pictures for keeps, not for sharing. They showed a woman Dana didn't recognize, dark-haired, slight, somewhere between 20 and 40 depending on the photo, sometimes smiling, sometimes looking directly at the camera the way you do when you want someone to really see you. In several of the photographs she was holding a baby. The baby was wrapped in a yellow blanket. The woman's eyes were closed. The way you hold something when you want to remember the weight of it. Dana's mother was not in any of these photographs. She went to the box on the floor beside the cot. Inside, manila folders in rubber-banded pairs, letters bundled with twine, and underneath everything, a small floral journal. She opened the journal to the first page. The handwriting wasn't Elaine's. It was tighter, smaller, left-leaning. The first entry was dated March 1989. She set it down. She wasn't ready. She went through the folders instead. The letters were addressed to no one. They all began the same way. When you read this, the way you write when you don't know who will find it or when. The hand was the same throughout. A woman named N. Then Dana found the birth certificate. Louisiana State Form. A girl. Born October 3, 1991. 6 pounds, 2 ounces. Name, Clare Marie Fontenot. Mother, Anne Fontenot. Father, blank. Dana stared at the date. October 1991. She had been born September 14, 1991. The same year. She turned the certificate over. On the back, in her mother's handwriting. The round open letters. The heavy pen pressure she had known her whole life. 2 words. Keep her safe. Dana sat down on the cot because her legs decided for her. She sat there for a while. She tried to run through what this could mean that wasn't what she was already thinking. Old records. A woman Elaine had taken in. The South had that history, children passed between families, lives lived off official paper. There were arrangements like that everywhere in those years. Done quietly, done with love, never discussed. This could be something ordinary, something kind, something her mother had simply never mentioned because, to Elaine, it was private and already over. She picked up another folder. Inside, a handwritten chart in Elaine's hand. Dates on the left, notes on the right. Milestones. First tooth. First word. First time walking. The entries ran from 1991 to 1998. Dana set the folder down and did not pick up another one. She put everything back in the box. She walked out of the room and pulled the broken door as shut as it would go. She went upstairs. She heated a can of soup from the grocery bag she'd brought from the car, and she sat at the kitchen table eating it slowly in the lamplight. The bowl was white with a blue rim, one of her mother's. Outside, the wind moved through the yard and the pines at the edge of the property bent and straightened. The house talked to itself the way old houses do. Creaks and pops and the small sounds of settling. Dana washed the bowl, turned out the kitchen light. She went to the sitting room, lay down on the mattress she'd dragged from upstairs, and pulled the blanket up to her chin. She set the flashlight on the floor still on, pointed at the ceiling, because she didn't feel like being in the dark. She told herself it was old history. She told herself she was exhausted and scared and that things always looked smaller in the morning. The baby moved once, slowly, like a fish turning. She was asleep in 10 minutes. She woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of the porch boards. 3 distinct steps. Then nothing. She lay still and listened. Wind, trees, the house settling. Then another step. Dana sat up. Her heart was already going fast. She grabbed the flashlight and turned it off. She didn't want to signal that she was awake, and sat in the dark, listening. 30 seconds. A minute. Silence. She told herself it was an animal. Raccoons got up on porches all the time out here. She'd heard them her whole childhood. She told herself to lie back down. She went to the window instead. She pulled the curtain aside just enough to see the porch. Empty. The yard beyond it empty. The tree line still. Then she looked at the driveway. Tire tracks. In the mud alongside her own. A second set, wider, heavier tread. A truck, maybe an SUV. Coming in and going back out again. Her car had been the only one in that driveway when she arrived. She was certain of it. She stepped back from the window. Now here's the thing about fear. It isn't always a scream. Sometimes it's very quiet. Sometimes it's just your body going still while your brain catches up. Dana stood in the sitting room in the dark and understood what she was actually dealing with for the first time since she'd picked up that hammer. She was not dealing with the past. She was dealing with right now. Whoever had sealed that door, or whoever had sent someone to check whether it was still sealed, they knew she was here. She checked her phone. No signal. She went to the kitchen and looked at the wall. There had been a landline here when she was growing up. A yellow phone next to the refrigerator. The bracket was still there. The phone was gone. She thought about getting in the car and driving to town. She thought about 9 miles of dark road and winter cold and what it would mean if the truck was still out there somewhere between her and the gas station. She went back downstairs instead. She needed to know what she was dealing with. This time she carried the box upstairs, set it on the kitchen table, turned on every light in the room, poured herself a glass of water. Then she started reading. The journal was Fontenot's, and had been 23 when she arrived in Bro Bridge. She was running from a man she referred to throughout only as R. Never his name, never. She described him in enough detail that you understood exactly why. He had money. He had connections in the parish. He had found her twice already in other cities, which is why she used no full names anywhere in the pages, not even her own until you were deep enough in that she trusted whoever was reading. She had found Elaine Morrow through someone at a women's shelter. Elaine had a basement room, she wrote, that she used for people who needed to disappear for a while, and stayed for 3 years. Clare was born in that basement room in October 1991. When Clare was 2 and had to run again, the man had found out which state she was in. She couldn't take the baby, not this time, not safely. She left Clare with Elaine. She wrote it plainly. Elaine will keep her safe. She's done it before. She knows how. She's done it before. Dana stopped. She looked at those words. She opened the bottom folder, the one she'd left until last because something in her had not been ready to reach it, and inside was her own birth certificate. Her full name. Her birthday, September 14th, 1991. Mother, Elaine Morrow. Alongside it, a second document she had never seen. A handwritten note in her mother's hand. Dana and Clare. Same month. Same house. Different rooms. 2 babies in the house in 1991. One raised in the open. One raised in the dark. Believe me when I tell you, Dana sat at that kitchen table and the room went very quiet. Not the house sounds quiet. Something deeper. She was 32 years old, 8 months pregnant, alone in a farmhouse with no phone, and she had just found out she had a sister. A sister who had been hidden in a room in her own basement. And someone alive knew that room existed. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. Because we are not close to done. She picked up her phone. Still nothing. She looked at the window, black glass, her own reflection. Then something moved behind it. She saw it in the reflection, a shape at the tree line. A silhouette, upright, still. Not moving the way an animal moves. Standing there, looking at the house. Dana turned off the kitchen light. In the sudden dark, the window cleared. She could see the yard, the driveway, the pale line of the gravel, the trees beyond. The shape was gone. She stood in the dark kitchen with one hand on the counter and one hand on her belly, where the baby had gone very still. Whoever was out there knew where she was, and she still didn't know why. The knock came just after dawn. Dana had not slept. She'd sat in the kitchen with the lights off and the hammer from the basement on the table beside her. And she'd watched the windows until the sky went from black to gray to the pale cold blue of early morning. When the knock came, 3 times, deliberate, unhurried, the knock of someone who expected to wait, she was already on her feet. She picked up the hammer and went to the door. Through the narrow window beside it she could see a woman on the porch. Older than Dana by a few years, or maybe it was just the look of someone who'd been outdoors a long time. Dark hair heavily streaked with gray. A canvas coat and work boots, standing with her hands visible at her sides. Dana noticed that and suspected it was deliberate. The woman looked directly at the window. "I'm not going to hurt you," she said through the glass. Her voice was level. "I've been watching this house since your mother died. I know who you are. My name is Clare." Dana did not open the door immediately. She looked at this woman and thought about the photographs downstairs. The woman in those pictures had been young. This woman was, she did the math, 33, 34. About Dana's age. She opened the door. Claire Fontenot was smaller than the posture suggested. She had a face that had worked hard. She looked at Dana. All of Dana, the belly, the hammer, the expression, and said plainly, "You found the room." "Yesterday," Dana said. "I thought you might." A pause. "Can I come in?" They sat at the kitchen table. Claire kept her coat on. Dana set the hammer on the counter where she could still see it. "My mother found your mother through a shelter connection," Claire said. "And Fontenot. She was 23, she had nothing, and she was running. Your mother had a room. She took her in." "She kept you," Dana said. "She had to run again when I was 2. He had found out which state she was in. She couldn't take me with her safely, not that time." Claire said this without trembling. She'd said it before, Dana thought. Many times to herself in the dark. "Elaine kept me. For 7 years I lived here. Mostly in the house, not just the basement. But when people came around she put me downstairs. Kept me quiet. Kept me safe." "You were hidden." "Yes. Did you know about me?" Claire looked up. "You were right there. Elaine called us sisters when she talked to us privately. I don't think she planned it that way exactly. You were hers and I was someone else's. But for those years, we were both just hers." "What happened when you were 7? "My mother came back. She was safe, papers, a new city, a real plan. She took me with her. We moved to Texas. I didn't come back to Louisiana until I was grown. I came back for your mother's funeral." A pause. "I stood at the back. I didn't think you'd know me." Dana thought about the faces she hadn't recognized. All those people standing in the rain. Why did she seal the door? Dana asked. "Because of him." Claire's jaw tightened. His name is Raymond Giles. He's my biological father. My mother never pressed charges. She was afraid of him, and he had money, and in those years he had this parish. He figured out years ago that my mother had stayed somewhere near Bro Bridge. He never knew the exact address. She stopped. 3 months ago he got out of federal prison. Tax fraud. He started looking again. Your mother called me in September. Dana felt something cold settle in. She knew he was looking. She said someone had come to the end of the drive, just idling there. She didn't know who. Then 6 weeks later, she was dead. Claire looked directly at her. A stroke. That's what they said. She was healthy, Dana. She walked every day. Her heart was fine at her last checkup. The kitchen was very quiet. You think someone killed her? I don't know. I honestly don't know. But I sealed that room because I didn't want Raymond to find what she kept down there. And then I heard you'd come back. And I've been watching the property since yesterday morning. That was your truck, Dana said. The tire tracks. I parked at the neighbor's gate and walked in. I'm sorry I frightened you. I didn't know how to knock on this door in the dark and explain all of this. Dana looked at this woman, this stranger who was not a stranger, who had eaten breakfast in this kitchen 30 years ago, who had probably thought of it as home too, maybe longer than Dana had. He was here last night, Dana said. Or someone was. At the tree line around 3 in the morning. I saw a shape. Claire went very still. What time? 3. Maybe 3:30. Claire was already pulling her phone from her coat pocket. I have signal if I stand at the edge of the property. I need to make a call. Who are you calling? The sheriff. His name is Aldous Trahan. He knew your mother. He helped us in '98 when we left. He's not one of Raymond's people. She stood up. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone else. She went out. Dana turned the lock. She stood in the kitchen with her hands on the back of the chair and looked at the box on the table. The photographs, the letters, the birth certificates. All of it was evidence of her mother doing the hardest kind of good. The kind that doesn't get acknowledged. The kind that costs you something every day and asks nothing back. Outside, Claire's voice was low and urgent. Dana couldn't make out the words. The baby pushed hard against her ribs, a long rolling press. She put her palm against the spot and held it there. I know, she said quietly. I know. We're okay. She wasn't entirely sure that was true, but she said it anyway. The sheriff arrived within the hour. Aldous Trahan was a man in his late 60s with the look of someone who had seen most things twice and stopped being surprised by most of them. He came with a deputy and a truck that had seen better years, and he shook Dana's hand at the door and said, Your mother was a good woman. I'm sorry I'm meeting you like this. He knew exactly who Raymond Giles was. He had a file, he said, older than some of the people in his department. Raymond had been investigated twice in this parish, once for assault, once for something he didn't specify in front of Dana, and had walked away from both. The federal conviction had been the first thing that actually held. He was at a hotel in the nearest town, checked in 3 days ago under a different name. But the desk clerk recognized him from a photograph, and he had paid with a card tied to one of his known accounts. Sloppy, Trahan said. Arrogant. Men like that usually were. They picked him up that afternoon. Trahan called Claire. Claire knocked on the door and told Dana. Dana sat down at the kitchen table and felt something unclench in her chest that she hadn't known was clenched. Is that it? She asked. For now. He'll lawyer up, he's good at that. But Trahan's pushing on the circumstances of your mother's death. The timing. The previous complaints against him in this parish. Claire sat down across from her. It'll take time. Do you think he did it? Killed her? Claire was quiet for a moment. I think Elaine knew things that were dangerous to him, and I think she died at a very convenient time. She paused. But she was also 61 and she'd been carrying weight for a long time. It might have been her heart. It might have been both. Dana nodded slowly. That was something she was going to have to live with. The not knowing. She and Claire spent the rest of that day and all of the next in the house together. They talked the way two people do when they're catching up on a lifetime at once. In bursts and tangents and sudden silences that weren't uncomfortable. Claire lived in Baton Rouge, worked as a contractor, had 2 kids. She showed Dana photographs on her phone. Dana looked at these children, her niece and nephew technically, and felt the strangeness of it and the rightness of it at the same time. They went through the basement room together, too. Not to clear it out. Claire wasn't ready for that and said so plainly. But they stood in it side by side with a proper light this time and looked at the photographs on the walls, the folded blanket on the cot, the lamp and the matches. I thought about this room a lot when I was grown, Claire said. I used to wonder if I'd imagined how small it was. It is small, Dana said. Yeah. She put her hand against the wall. But she made it safe. Your mother made it safe. On the second night, Dana's water broke. She was in the kitchen making tea. She said a word she would not repeat in front of children. And then she called for Clare, who appeared in the doorway in about 12 seconds with her coat already half on. Okay, Clare said. Okay, let's go. The nearest hospital was 40 minutes. Clare drove. Dana breathed. The winter sky had gone clear for the first time since Dana had arrived, and through the truck window she could see the stars above the tree line, sharp and cold and very far away. She thought about her mother driving this same road alone, 30 years ago. She thought about a young woman named and in a basement room with a lamp and a box of matches and a baby in a yellow blanket. She thought about all the ways people protect each other that no one ever sees or records or says thank you for. The baby was born at 2:17 in the morning. A boy, 6 pounds, 9 ounces. He arrived quietly, which the nurses said was unusual. He looked around the room with the serious expression of someone who has just woken up somewhere unexpected and is taking stock. Dana held him and didn't say anything for a while. Clare was in the waiting room. When the nurse brought her back, she stood in the doorway and looked at the baby and then at Dana. Does he have a name? Dana looked down at him. I was going to name him after his father, she said. But I'm not doing that. Clare waited. What was your mother's name? Dana said. Her first name. Anne. Dana looked at her son. Arthur, she said. For Anne. Close enough. Clare smiled. It was the first time Dana had seen it, the real one, not the careful one, and it was the kind of smile that costs something. They stayed 2 days. When they left, Dana drove because she wanted to, and Clare sat in the passenger seat with Arthur across her lap in the car seat Clare had bought at the hospital gift shop because nobody had been planning on any of this. Dana had started making calculations on the drive back. What it would cost to properly fix the house. What the place could be if someone put real work into it. She had a child now. She had a sister. She had a house she owned outright in a state she'd spent 20 years trying to leave behind. That was enough to start with. She went down to the basement one more time before they loaded the last of her things. The door was still open. She'd left it that way on purpose. She stood in the doorway and looked at the room. The cot, the table, the lamp, the photographs still pinned to the walls. She thought about all the years that room had held. A woman running. A baby growing. A secret kept so long it outlived the person who kept it. She didn't go in. She left the door open. Some things don't need to be sealed again. Some things just need to be seen.